Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series, Essays on the Gita, with our beloved Ranga. And we are on page 9, beginning with the sentence, "There have been other syntheses in the long history of Indian thought."
So we will read the para. There have been other syntheses. Now, he has told us precisely that there are many philosophies which are exclusive. They concentrate only on the truth that they want to express. And he has told us very clearly that the Gita is not exclusive. It says that it combines monism, Sankhya, Mayavada, qualified monism, Vaishnava theism, all these things it combines. So, naturally, he says that the Gita is synthetic in its exposition of the truth. So, what have been the earlier syntheses, that's what he's going to list out for us. And we will see how they are synthetic. I'll read the whole para first, and then we'll come back to it. There have been other syntheses in the long history of Indian thought. We start with the Vedic synthesis of the psychological being of man in its highest flights and widest rangings of divine knowledge, power, joy, life and glory, with the cosmic existence of the gods pursued behind the symbols of the material universe into those superior planes which are hidden from the physical sense and the material mentality. The crown of this synthesis was, in the experience of the Vedic rishis, something divine, transcendent and blissful, in whose unity the increasing soul of man and the eternal divine fullness of the cosmic Godheads meet perfectly and fulfill themselves. The Upanishads take up this crowning experience of the earlier seers and make it their starting point for a high and profound synthesis of spiritual knowledge. They draw together into a great harmony all that had been seen and experienced by the inspired and liberated knowers of the eternal throughout a great and fruitful period of spiritual seeking. The Gita starts from this Vedantic synthesis and, upon the basis of its essential ideas, builds another harmony of the three great means and powers: love, knowledge and works, through which the soul of man can directly approach and cast itself into the eternal. There is yet another, the Tantric, which, though less subtle and spiritually profound, is even more bold and forceful than the synthesis of the Gita. For it seizes even upon the obstacles to the spiritual life and compels them to become the means for a richer spiritual conquest and enables us to embrace the whole of life in our divine scope as the Leela of the divine. And in some directions, it is more immediately rich and fruitful, for it brings forward into the foreground, along with the divine knowledge, divine works, and an enriched devotion of divine love, the secrets also of the Hatha and Raja Yogas, the use of the body and of mental ascesis for the opening up of the divine life on all its planes, to which the Gita gives only a passing and perfunctory attention. Moreover, it grasps at the idea of the divine perfectibility of man, possessed by the Vedic rishis, but thrown into the background by the intermediate ages, which is destined to fill so large a place in any future synthesis of human thought, experience, and aspiration. So, Sri Aurobindo is now expanding on the idea of the synthetic nature of the Gita. So obviously he is thinking and telling us what have been the earlier synthesis. And we'll see what is the Vedic synthesis, what is the Upanishadic synthesis, what is the Tantric synthesis, and the Gita synthesis. What is it synthesizing? That's what we have to see. I begin from the first sentence. There have been other syntheses in the long history of Indian thought. It goes back to thousands of years. In fact, we don't even know how many thousand years. There are varying opinions, and we are not sure. We start with the Vedic synthesis of the psychological being of man in its highest flights, psychological being of man in its highest flights and widest rangings of divine knowledge, power, joy, life and glory, with the cosmic existence of the gods, pursued behind the symbols of the material universe into those superior planes which are hidden from the physical sense and the material mentality. When Sri Aurobindo is using the word material mentality, he means the physical mind, which is the lowest level of the three divisions of mind in man. We have a physical mind, which is the sense mind, the manas in Indian psychology. Then we have the vital mind. Then we have the pure mind, that capacity of the mind which is capable of logic, which is capable of rationality, and does not allow the vital and the body to interfere with its functions. Okay? So, it's a big sentence, and we'll see what he is talking about. So, the Vedic synthesis is combining, to put it very shortly, very short form, it combines heaven and earth. It combines spirit and matter, if you want to understand that way. Because there is a phrase there which says, heaven is my father and the earth is my mother. So, both are included in the scheme of reality. Nothing is to be rejected. Okay?
I guess I have a question as to all those different minds that you were talking about and how they relate to the second tier.
The second tier, the second level is the spiritual planes of consciousness, where the consciousness of man escapes from the body-mind life, and according to Sri Aurobindo, who has mapped out these regions so beautifully and clearly, he calls them there are four planes which he calls the second tier, as you said. The first is the higher mind. The second is the illumined mind. The third is the intuition, the intuitive mind. And the fourth is the overmind. Above the overmind, you are entering into the third tier. That's the supermind. So, if you want a description of these four planes of consciousness, the first is the higher mind. So, it differs from the pure reason in this way. The pure reason, however clear it is in its own domain, yet is hampered by effort and hard labor. So, it is like looking for something in a candlelit room. That's his expression. Okay? It's a candlelit room. The mind is a candlelit room. There's not much of light. There's just a little bit of light. And when you have to see something in a corner, you have to strain and struggle. So when you go to the higher mind level, it becomes like a broad daylight. That's the nature of the higher mind. No more struggle. As he puts it beautifully, he says, no more galley slave labor. A galley slave is one who rows. He used to row in the sea. Okay? There used to be rows on the left and rows on the right of slaves who were chained to the rows and the seats, and they had to do that. So hard labor. That's the nature of the logical mind. But he says when we go to the higher mind, everything becomes as clear as broad daylight. Okay? So then when you go to the illumined mind, the light becomes even more intense between the illumined mind and the intuitive mind, it is like lightning. The amount of light that comes from a flash of lightning is like that, even more bright. Finally, you go to the overmind level and you have the highest possible capacities of mind, but you are still you are seeing the many. You are not seeing the absolute oneness. That is seen only at the supermind. So these are the 4 planes of consciousness which he is saying. But the material mind, the material mind is as Narad said, tier 1. Okay? It includes the material world, the world of energy, pranic world, and the mental world. This is our base, triple world. So, bhu, bhuvar, swar if you want. And there is ignorance. We see the many and there is ignorance. But the moment you go to the tier 2, the ignorance starts becoming less and less. You start, as you said, you see broad daylight, you see everything clearly, you start seeing the oneness of things also. Sometimes you see the physical world is unreal, but the mind is clear. There is light in the mind, and that's what you see the reality. Not maybe absolutely perfectly, but you start seeing the reality in the spiritual planes.
But the duality is still there.
The dualities don't exist in the second tier. They disappear. You start seeing the oneness. When you start seeing the oneness, the dualities disappear. They are seen, for instance, cruelty and kindness, hot and cold, are seen as 2 poles of the same vibration. Left and right, if you want. Infinity this side, infinity that side. But they are basically their essence is the same. Okay? This is one side and that side. Negative and positive. So, that's the first Vedic synthesis. Then we come to and we can read the sentence of the psychological being of man in its highest flights. So it goes right up to the overmind level because he is talking of the gods. Okay? So, highest flights and widest ranges of divine knowledge, power, joy, life and glory. Note interestingly that yogis need not have all these together. They can have only knowledge, but they may not have power. They may have power, but they may not have joy. They may have life and joy, but not the knowledge and power. A good instance is the Nietzsche, who had the experience of the power aspect. And that's why he speaks of the man who is a superior man. He must exercise his power and lord it over others. So, that was again, the philosophy was twisted a little bit and it ended up pretty wrongly for the country in which he lived. Okay, so that is Nietzsche. But he had the experience of the self. It is obvious because he speaks of morality not being applicable at the spiritual level. You have to go beyond good and evil. So if he speaks of going beyond good and evil, necessarily he is in the tier 2. But he overstretched the power aspect.
Could I ask you about with the cosmic existence of the gods?
Yes. That means you are combining the lower, because he is talking of the psychological being of man, but in its highest flights with the gods. So again we come back to the idea of heaven is my father and the earth is my mother. So that's the synthesis in the Veda. Okay? Now, the crown of this synthesis was in the experience of the Vedic rishis something divine, transcendent and blissful, in whose unity the increasing soul of man and the eternal divine fullness of the cosmic Godheads meet perfectly and fulfill themselves. So, he is talking of the overmind because the God is there, but there is reference to the supermind also in the Vedas. Srimdo finds the words there used, and with his own experience he could see how does he identify a particular plane from the vibrations that it creates. So he knows the nature of the vibrations and he knows that this is coming from this level. Each world has got its own vibrations. And if you understand the vibrations, you know, oh, this is coming from here. It's almost like language.
Now, this is what Mother did with flowers.
Yes,
She felt the vibration.
exactly. And she knows what that vibration stands for. Is it for peace? Is it for silence? Is it for power? Exactly. So, all these things are ultimately expressed by vibrations. In fact, at the highest level, everything is vibration. All creation is nothing but vibration. So, and they fulfill themselves. Next, he comes to the Upanishads also. And the Upanishads also are synthetic. Take up this crowning experience of the earlier seers, because the Upanishads constitute the Vedanta philosophy. Veda Anta, the end of the Vedic period. And it can be interpreted in two ways. At the end of the Vedic period in time, as well as the natural conclusion of the Vedic experiences later on expressed in the philosophies. So it can be interpreted in two ways. Actually, it came at the end of that's why he's saying the earlier seers. So it's a question of time also. The Upanishads came after the Vedas. Okay? So, take up this crowning experience of the earlier seers and makes it their starting point for a high and profound synthesis of spiritual knowledge. They draw together into a great harmony all that had been seen and experienced by the inspired and liberated knowers of the eternal throughout a great and fruitful period of spiritual seeking. Okay? Even after the Vedic period, although there may have been a little bit of a drop in the scale of consciousness, yet the Upanishadic period also was a great period of spiritual experience. Then, when the Buddhism came into the picture, 600 BC, there was a sharp drop. Because the idea of the unreality of the world was imposed upon the Indian mind, and it accepted that idea and started rejecting the physical world. It was no more synthetic. It became very, very exclusive. You want only the higher, you don't want the lower, because the lower is full of imperfections. It is true that the lower is limited to imperfections apparently, because the divine is there, but the instruments of knowledge which is seeing that reality is defective. When man with his senses is looking at something, at the reality, he is not seeing the reality fully. So there was a drop in that sense. And in India there was a great, great fall. And that's why it ended in degradation of the quality of life and rejection of the physical world, poverty, illiteracy, all these things was a result of that. Non-attention to the physical world.
So was almost all of the Vedic knowledge lost?
It was almost lost, but now the thing is this. How do you recover that knowledge? It's very difficult. In the Indian memory, we knew that there was a great period of Vedic knowledge. But the thing is, the knowledge was lost. So you remembered that it was something very great, but nobody knew what the Vedas were speaking about, because they were in symbolic language. They speak of Indra, they speak of Maruts, they speak of Varuna, they speak of Indra. Okay? They speak of Agni. But what does Agni mean? To which level does it belong? What it is God they are speaking of? So much of it was lost. But here is now, several attempts were made, and that is discussed in the Secret of the Veda. The Western philosophers from Germany, Max Muller, Paul Deussen and others, they tried to understand the Vedas, but they did not understand it. Because the images used are sometimes so non-physical that you think it is childish nonsense. So they completely misunderstood that. They did not understand it properly. So Max Muller was largely guilty of that. instead of attributing the non-understanding to his own limitation of consciousness and intelligence, he said that the Vedas themselves were childish gibberish. Although they appreciated the Upanishads, because the Upanishads have been put in mental terms and clear terms. So that they appreciate. But the Vedas they could not appreciate.
So the Upanishads were able to take much of the Vedas?
Yes, they were the end of the Vedas, but they were put into mental terms. They were put into philosophic language. That's why Sri Aurobindo speaks of the 3 stages of how knowledge comes. The highest level of knowledge is it uses only images. Okay? Because it can't, what are the words it will use? It can't use. So it uses, the truths are expressed through images, metaphors and similes and images. Okay? Then that spiritual knowledge, which is the intuition, has to be expressed to others in mental terms. So it comes down to philosophy. Spiritual experience drops and becomes philosophy. And philosophy also is spiritual knowledge in mental terms, but then you have to drop down to the physical science, because then you are dealing with truths at the physical level. So there is the gradation. Spiritual knowledge, philosophical knowledge, scientific knowledge. There is a gradation that he speaks of. Okay. Now there is an attempt to go back, and even science is making the effort and beginning to succeed. It's also going back to the realities and seeing that reality is more non-physical than physical. Even scientists are having experiences, and you can find these on the internet. It's very interesting. So, he has spoken about 2, the Vedic synthesis and the Upanishads. Now he comes to the Gita itself. So, what is the Gita synthesizing? We'll have a look at it. The Upanishads take up this crowning experience of the earliest years and make it their starting point for a high and profound synthesis of spiritual knowledge. They draw together into a great harmony all that has been seen and experienced by the inspired and liberated knowers of the eternal throughout a great and fruitful period of spiritual seeking. After that, there is a fall. It was no more a great and fruitful period of spiritual seeking. There is a great, great fall. And Sri Aurobindo uses the words, the progressive mind disappeared in India. And he says that to get back the progressive mind, look at the way Sri Aurobindo sees things. The West had the progressive mind, but they didn't have the spiritual mind. So, the progressive mind had to be brought into India by the British. And then there was, although their intentions were wrong, but anyway, that is how the progressive mind came into India. So Sri Aurobindo says that in the synthesis in a very guarded manner. He says that that very country of spiritual knowledge had to undergo a foreign domination, because the progressive mind had to be again reawakened in India. And now you can see that it is absolutely bearing fruit. The top companies in America are all headed by Indians mostly. Okay, Microsoft, Google, anything else, MasterCard, everywhere, in the banks also, in the stock markets. They are full of Indians all over. Even Silicon Valley is full of Indians. So, this progressive mind had to be again introduced into India. Okay, so the Upanishads, by the way, there are 12 main Upanishads which are studied, and some of them are very big. Chandogya Upanishad and the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad are big volumes like that. But there are, apart from the 12, there are altogether about 100 plus Upanishads. And some of them are very minor Upanishads, but very beautiful. And they are known as minor Upanishads, Gauna Upanishad. But they are wonderful. They are all available also in translations also they are available in Sanskrit as well as. So, the Upanishads form part of the Vedanta. As I said, Vedasya Anta. The spiritual experience of the Vedas expressed in symbols has been expressed in philosophical mental language in the Upanishads. Okay? Now we come to the Gita. The Gita starts from this Vedantic synthesis and upon the basis of its essential ideas builds another harmony of the three great means and powers. And what are they? Love, knowledge and works, corresponding to Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga, through which the soul of man can directly approach and cast itself into the eternal. Look at that. Cast itself into the eternal. Plunge and become one with it. The next is the Tantra. The Tantra also is a synthesis. Now, so Srimda is saying that the Gita is a synthesis of Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga. They are exclusive, but the Gita combines all the three and says that all the three are important. It also combines philosophies. It combines Vedanta, qualified monism, as well as Sankhya. So it is synthetic in that sense, in a double sense, the Gita. Okay? Now we come to the Tantra. The Tantra is a very interesting thing. Okay? And Srimda has given a footnote. All the Puranic tradition, it must be remembered, draws the richness of its contents from the Tantra, or the Puranic stories, the Puranic tradition. So, we'll see what the Tantra is and let's finish the sentence. There is yet another, the Tantric, which, though less subtle and spiritually profound, is even more bold and forceful than the synthesis of the Gita. For it seizes even upon the obstacles to the spiritual life and compels them to become the means for a richer spiritual conquest and enables us to embrace the whole of life in our divine scope as the Leela of the divine. The Leela, there's a footnote saying, explaining the cosmic play. The divine playing with in the physical world, enjoying himself. And in some directions, it is more immediately rich and fruitful, for it brings forward into the foreground, along with the divine knowledge, divine works, and an enriched devotion of divine love, the secrets also of the Hatha Yoga, the Raja Yogas, the use of the body, and of mental ascesis for the opening up of the divine life on all its planes. That's why it is a synthesis. On all its planes, to which the Gita gives only a passing and perfunctory attention. So, the Gita is not talking of the transformation of the material world. It stops there. It says that man need not disappear from the physical world to get knowledge. He can remain in the physical world and yet lead a divine life. But the transformation that Srimda is speaking of, it has just been hinted at. Srimda is saying it gives only a passing and perfunctory attention, whereas the Tantra speaks of the perfection, perfectibility. So, there you are. So, Srimda, I might as well mention in passing that three principles to Tantra and Srimda Yoga are common. Okay? One, no running away from the physical world. They accept the physical world and conquer it, but there is a difference in the Tantric approach and Srimda's approach. That difference we will see what it is. Then the second one is the aim of life is ananda, enjoyment. But the right enjoyment, not the pleasure, the limited and imperfect and impure pleasures. No. Pure pleasure. Pure pleasure is ananda. That which is without cause, causeless and endless. So, that is. And the third element which is common to both is the worship of the Divine Mother, the energy of the Divine. The other systems, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, are going through the Purusha aspect, the consciousness aspect. But Tantra is going through the Prakriti aspect, the power of the Divine, the Divine Mother. So, this is the difference. That's why Srimda is he praises, he is calling it, he is calling it, saying, in the synthesis he calls the Tantra a remarkable system. And what is that? We will touch it because it has earned a bad name. The Tantra has earned a bad name because it aimed so high that it did not always succeed. I'll explain to you what he means by that. Okay, so let us take greed. I want to get rid of greed. The moral ways don't indulge in greed. But the greed can be there in the mind. The spiritual method is get rid of greed in the mind, not physically. It doesn't matter whether it is there or not, whether you are eating what you want or not, it doesn't matter. But cut the root of it in the mind or psychologically. Cut the root there, then what you are eating or what you like and dislike doesn't make any difference. Because you are absolutely impartial. So that's a spiritual solution. What is the tantric solution? No, I will indulge in it and conquer it there itself, in the act. So that's a tantra. Okay? Now this is a very dangerous thing because you may not succeed. Shiva says that one need not invite all these things. The problems will come of themselves. These people are doing that. They purposely indulge in those things which are forbidden and want to get rid of them. But then how is it such a remarkable system? Because it is very bold. And the Tantra is fit only for those who are already half divine. Because then it makes no difference whether you are eating vegetarian food or non-vegetarian food. It makes no difference to you. Whether you are doing those things which are considered immoral, it doesn't make any difference because they are already at a divine level. So the Tantra is relevant and remarkable, but it is applicable without any defect or without any problems to those who are already at a high level of spiritual perfection. Okay? But those who are not, Tantra is not advised to them. And that's why Tantra divided into two systems, the left-hand path and the right-hand path. The left-hand path is where they indulge in everything, including even eating human flesh. Okay? Drinking wine from human skulls to avoid the sense of disgust and repulsion. So you do that and get rid of it. Okay? So that is not what Srivanu would recommend. There are better methods and more harmonious and more refined methods to get rid of your desires. You don't need to indulge in it.
But he appreciates what Tantra has done.
Yes, because it is bold. That's exactly what he's saying. But his methods he does not agree with. Okay, he does not agree with the left-hand path. But the right-hand path went through knowledge and not the power aspect. And that's fine. There still are tantrics in India. But mainly it was in Bengal, the worship of the Divine Mother in Bengal, and Tibet. Tibet was a big center of tantric knowledge. What has happened now, I don't know. But it was at one time that. So, Tantra also was a synthetic philosophy and practice, which, though less subtle and spiritually profound, is even more bold and forceful, full of power than the synthesis of the Gita. For it seizes even upon the obstacles to the spiritual life. That's exactly what I was telling you. Okay? So, everything that you are recommended morally not to do, they will do. They'll say, I'll do it and be unaffected by it. So that's what they are doing. They are seizing upon the obstacles and conquering them. Okay? And compels them to become the means of a richer spiritual conquest and enables us to embrace the whole of life. So life in all its aspects. There are all these aspects in life, you can't run away from them. There is good and bad. So you face the bad and conquer them. That's the tantric method. Instead of those philosophy, there are subtler and more refined methods of doing it. You don't need to invite these things. In our divine scope is the Leela of the divine. So, the Leela also is because power and play. The world is not being rejected by the tantrics. Okay? And in some directions, it is more immediately rich and fruitful, for it brings forward into the foreground, along with the divine knowledge, divine works, and an enriched devotion of divine love. The secrets also of the Hatha Yoga, the Raja Yogas, and the use of the body. Okay? So all these the tantrics do. They do use Hatha Yogic methods and the Raja Yoga methods. And of mental ascesis for the opening of the divine life on all its planes. Note the word all its planes, including the lowest planes, to which the Gita gives only a passing and perfunctory attention. Srindra is putting it in a very mild manner, but what he means is the transformation of the lowest, the transformation of the physical world itself, which the Gita only hints at. It doesn't go beyond. And he explains that in the essays later on. He says that maybe it was not the time to reveal, because revealing something which makes no sense to that particular time and age is, you could consider it meaningless and premature. So that's why the Gita does not speak about it. Okay? Moreover, it grasps at the idea of the divine perfectibility of man. There you are. Okay? He's talking of the Tantra. Huh? Moreover, it grasps at that idea of the divine perfectibility of man, which Sri Aurobindo also latches onto. Man can become perfect. Okay? Possessed by the Vedic rishis, but thrown into the background by the intermediate ages. The intermediate ages dominated by Mayavada and Buddhism, which is destined to fill so large a place in any future synthesis of human thought, experience and aspiration. So, what's he referring to? What's he referring to the future synthesis of human thought? And he is very clearly forecasting it is destined to fill so large a place in the future synthesis. Any guess? Sri Aurobindo's own philosophy. The synthesis of integral yoga. He is hinting at it in very guarded words. But very clearly, he is referring to his own system. See? Which is destined to fill so large a place in any future synthesis of human thought, experience and aspiration. So he is not saying that my yoga is the synthetic, but he's called it the synthetic yoga. The synthesis of yoga and the integral philosophy. So that's what he's saying. Now, we of the coming day stand at the head of a new age of development which must lead to such a new and larger synthesis. Very clear statement of what I said, now he is explaining. We'll come back to it. We are not called upon to be orthodox Vedantins of any of the three schools or tantrics, or to adhere to one of the theistic religions of the past, or to entrench ourselves within the four corners of the teaching of the Gita. Not even the Gita. We will not bind ourselves even by the Gita. That would be to limit ourselves and to attempt to create our spiritual life out of the being, knowledge and nature of others, of the men of the past, instead of building it out of our own being and potentialities. Now, we do not belong to the past dawns, but to the knowns of the future. What a sentence. So, and who is this we? Sri Aurobindo and his followers. So, we do not belong to the past dawns, however brilliant they were, but to the knowns of the future. The known is when the sun is at its zenith and the maximum light is there at that time. The dawn is a twilight, but the noon is absolutely blazing sunlight. Okay. a mass of new material is flowing into us. We have not only to assimilate the influence of the great theistic religions of India and of the world, and a recovered sense of the meaning of Buddhism, but to take full account of the potent, though limited, revelations of modern knowledge and seeking. In the West, science and religion are opposed to each other, not in India. Say very clearly, modern knowledge and seeking also is going to include. Okay? And beyond that, the remote and dateless past, which seemed to be dead, he is referring to the Vedas, is returning upon us with an effulgence of many luminous secrets long lost to the consciousness of mankind, but now breaking out again from behind the veil. All this points to a new, a very rich, a very vast synthesis, a fresh and widely embracing harmonization of our gains is both an intellectual and a spiritual necessity of the future. But just as the past syntheses have taken those which preceded them for their starting point, so also must that of the future, to be on firm ground, proceed from what the great bodies of realized spiritual thought and experience in the past have given. Among them, the Gita takes a most important place. So we will base ourselves on the Gita, but not limit ourselves by the Gita. Our object then in studying the Gita will not be a scholastic or academical scrutiny of its thought, nor to place its philosophy in the history of metaphysical speculation, nor shall we deal with it in the manner of the analytical dialectician. We approach it for help and light, and our aim must be to distinguish its essential and living message, that in it on which humanity has to seize for its perfection and its highest spiritual welfare. We will read this last but one para again next time, and we will see what the implications are. We of the coming day. And why is he saying that new light is coming into us and all that? He is talking of his own experiences. When he came to Pondicherry, he went back to the Vedic period. He started delving into the Vedas. And he discovered there the roots of the spirit, supermind. Truth consciousness, Rita Chit, Satyam Ritam Brihat. These are the words he could find in the Vedas, which clearly were speaking of the supermind. When he says we of the coming day, he very clearly is referring to himself and his philosophy. Because he always speaks of his own philosophy as we. He is not talking of general we, he is talking of himself. We of the coming day stand at the head of a new age of development. Very clearly he has told Mrinalini, also his wife, that I have been born with this urge, and I know that I have the power in me to raise this fallen race, to raise it up again. So he says that. So he knew what is it. So that's why he's saying, we at the coming day stand at the head of a new age of development, which must lead to such a new and larger synthesis. No rejection of the physical world. Indian spirituality has to combine heaven and earth. Marrying the soil to the sky is his words he uses. So, we are not called upon to be orthodox Vedantins. So, we can go beyond Vedanta. Because the Vedanta speaks only of tier 2. They don't speak about the tier 3. Mostly. Okay? There may be hints, but not any detailed explanation and detailed exposition of the idea. Nor have any of the three schools. What are the three schools? Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. Nor or Tantrics, or to adhere to any one of the theistic religions. He is talking of Vaishnavism and Shaivism. Okay? Of the past, or to entrench ourselves within the four corners of the teaching of the Gita. So even the Gita, it's wonderful, but we need not entrench ourselves in the Gita. We can go beyond the Gita. We'll use it as a help, but we will not limit ourselves by the Gita. Because the Gita does not speak of the supermind. It only hints at it. But we will go beyond that. In fact, someone challenged him. I think it was Dilip Kumar Roy who challenged him and asked him, "You are going even beyond what Sri Krishna has said." So then Swamdev explains that if evolution has any meaning at all, there is no end to evolution. So how can you say that the past is the greatest? Obviously you have to go beyond that.
But Dilip Kumar Roy couldn't get over his, what shall I say, almost obsessive attachment to Krishna. And Sri Aurobindo said, if you can give yourself to Krishna, you can give yourself to me.
Yes.
How beautiful.
Yes. There is a book in Hindi which gives all the statements of Sri Aurobindo which prove that he was an avatar. He is admitting this is one of those statements. If you can give yourself to Krishna, you can give yourself to me. It's the same. There is no difference. In fact, in the overmind consciousness, Sri Krishna descended into his body. His very body he descended and became the same. In fact, when he was in jail, it was Sri Krishna who was guiding him. Even when he heard the voice, go to Chandranagar, go to Pondicherry, it was Sri Krishna's voice that he was hearing. And when he was in jail, detailed explanation of the Gita and the Vedas. And that's why he started looking into the Vedas when he came to Pondicherry. Okay, so, and this magnificent sentence here, we do not belong to the past dawns, but to the noons of the future. In other words, we'll be blazing a new trail altogether. A mass of new material is flowing into us. What he means is, he was examining the Vedic texts, and he was seeing that there is enough information about the supermind also there. And he was opening up to the supermind. And Vivekananda also came and gave him knowledge of the overmind and the supermind. So he knew that this work has to be done.
So when he says us, he means himself?
Absolutely. Without the slightest of doubt.
Yes.
So it's flowing into us. We have not only to assimilate the influence of the great theistic religions of India and the world, and a recovered sense of the meaning of Buddhism. Even Buddhism, he says, is a Vedic system. It is not a non-Vedic system. He says in Indian philosophy, Buddhism and Sankhya are supposed to be non-Vedic systems. But he says, no, it's not like that. It's a misinterpretation to say that Buddhistic is rejecting the physical world. It's a Vedantic system. He says that. So that's what he's meaning by a recovered sense of the meaning of Buddhism. But to take full account of the potent, though limited revelations of modern knowledge and seeking. We'll even use science. We will not reject science. Although it is limited knowledge, but there is a limited truth in it. So we'll use even science. And that's the reason why in the ashram we don't reject computers, we don't reject cars, we don't reject anything in the physical world that science has brought to us, we use them. We don't even reject the cinema, which is considered to be, in the spiritual life, you're supposed to avoid all these things. You lead the simple life. Who was that American who proposed a very simple life, going back to the rural kind of life? Thoreau or something? I forget. So Gandhi was following him. He said that we should go back to the rural life.
It was Thoreau.
Yeah.
It was Thoreau.
Yeah, Thoreau. So Sri Aurobindo is saying, no, we don't need to do that. In fact, he says in one place, because Gandhi was stressing that we must go back to the villages, we must lead the village life. Sri Aurobindo says, no. The maximum progress of humanity always took place in cities, not in the villages. So, that's what he's saying. though limited revelations of modern knowledge and seeking. And beyond that, the remote and dateless past, which seemed to be dead, he's talking of the Vedas, is returning upon us. And with an effulgence of many luminous secrets long lost in the consciousness of mankind, but now breaking out again from behind the veil. Recently, until relatively recently, people thought that Srimad has written the Savitri, the synthesis, the life divine. But now we know that he has written a huge amount on the Vedas. The secret of the Veda, the hymns to the Veda, the studies in Vedic studies. That's a 1,000-page book. So how much he has worked on that? That's what he's meaning here. He's saying, which seemed to be dead, is returning upon us. So the Vedas were returning upon him with an effulgence of many luminous secrets long lost in the consciousness of mankind, but now breaking out again from behind the veil. All this points to a new, very rich and a very vast synthesis. So he is talking of the integral yoga. A fresh and widely embracing harmonization of our gains is both an intellectual and spiritual necessity. We don't need to reject the intellectual aspect. Okay? But just as the past syntheses have taken those which preceded them for their starting point, so also must that of the future, to be on firm ground, proceed from what the great bodies of realized spiritual thought and experience in the past have given. Among them, the Gita takes a most important place. So we will base ourselves on the Gita, but we will go beyond the Gita.
Thank you, Ranga. Namaste all.